Okay, we're going to talk about biodiversity and conservation. Here we have a food web, and as you notice, the upper levels are dependent on the lower levels. And one thing that we need to know and understand is that biodiversity is going to make all of our ecosystems more stable. Here is another food web that kind of depicts that, and what's important here is that we understand that there's an interdependence among all the different species when you're in a food web. You move one, it's going to affect them all. So what exactly is biodiversity? Bio is a prefix that we had, mean living. Diversity is a variety. So it's a variety of species in a certain area. Biodiversity is really important, and it is studied by doing field studies where you measure the number of different species in an area that they live in, and then you extrapolate that information. It increases as you move towards the equator, and this is really important for you to know and understand. It does this because as you go towards the equator, temperatures increase, and this increases the rate of development of organisms, which means the organisms have a faster generation time. When you have a faster generation time, that means I get more generations, and with more generations, I get the increase of genetic mutations. These mutations then means that we have more diversity in that area. That diversity allows for organisms to change and adapt as the environment may change. So what is the importance of biodiversity? And you need to know these for your test. It's important. Number one is biodiversity is important because all organisms in a food web are interdependent on each other. They depend on each other for survival. Even the lowliest of creatures, plants, fungi, bacteria, they're all important parts of the food web, no matter how far down they are. Secondly, it's stability of the ecosystems. The more biodiversity you have, the more stability that you have within that ecosystem. The more stability an ecosystem has, the more apt it is likely to withstand any type of disruption or change in the environment. Thirdly, it's the human needs that cause that is the reason that biodiversity is important. The human needs, such as it helps provide oxygen, food, and helps the nutrient cycle to continue so that we have things like nitrogen to make our amino acids and things that we need, the raw materials that we need to survive, health products, entertainment. So the things that we need as humans comes about because of biodiversity. Loss of biodiversity is what we're going to talk about next. What are some things that will threaten biodiversity? So to understand that, you have to understand three terms. The first term meaning extinction. Extinction is when I have no member of the species still living. The next term is an endangered species. This is a species that is in danger of becoming extinct. The numbers have gotten so low that they are in danger of becoming extinct. The next level is threatened species. And these species that are in the danger of becoming endangered. All right? So this is what you need to know for the test. That is going to go from threatened species to endangered species to extinction. That is the order that things will go in. Here is a great chart of mass extinctions and background extinctions. When we read our exotic species article, they talked a lot about mass extinctions and background extinctions. Actually, when we did our extinction lab. So you want to understand what a mass extinction is versus a background. Mass extinction is when you have 75% of your species that are lost in a very short period of time, about 2 million years. And that may not seem like a lot of time. I mean, it seems like a great deal of time, but really isn't that amount of time a lot of time in comparison to the millions of years we're talking about. When I talked about the exotic species article, what you need to know about that for the test is you need to understand why it is not a good thing for people, regular everyday people, to care for exotic pets. So why is it not good for everyday untrained people to keep exotic animals as pets? Why is it not good? One, for the environment, two, for the people, and three, for the animal. Here's another one that talks about species extinction and human population and how they kind of grow together. What are some of the threats of biodiversity? We said we're going to talk about the loss of biodiversity. Number one, habitat loss. This is when we have entire habitats are destroyed through things such as deforestation, coral reef destruction. When you take out these type of things that have such large amounts of biodiversity in them, it has a domino effect on so many other areas of the ecosystem. Habitat fragmentation is an area. That's when we separate organisms from their habitat by taking out the habitat and building something else that we might need. And so this separates the organisms from their whole land they're usually used to going on. And so when we herd them all together in a smaller area, what you end up getting essentially is a larger population density. And we have learned that having a larger population density will increase those, they will magnify the effects of the limiting factors of that ecosystem. Next is edge effects, and you need to know this for the test also. It's the different conditions along the boundaries of your ecosystem. So your ecosystem is going to change as it starts to transition into another ecosystem. Habitat degradation is things such as air pollution, acid rain, ozone, water pollution, fertilizers, waste, heavy metals, detergents, chemicals, land pollution, garbage, pesticides, things that we contribute to. Most of our habitat are degraded not by things like that we see, such as garbage, something we see every day, so we think of that as being the most type of pollution, but it really isn't. There are many, 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 many other forms of pollution that cause greater problems than just that of trash. Exotic species is a species introduced to a new area that causes problems for the natives or the ones that stay there. These can also be called invader species. And what can happen is these usually grow very, very rapidly because they usually do not have anything to keep them in check, such as predators, in that area. Here's some examples of them. Some fish, different plant life, beetles. So why is it important that we conserve our biodiversity? Well, we already mentioned 3 really important reasons for biodiversity, so why do we want to make sure that we have it? It's part of our duty as biologists to do that, because part of biology is studying and to study living things, the methodology to sustain biodiversity, and we have to become involved in the protections of species and natural resources. That's all part of conserving biodiversity. We need to be able to protect our species and protect our natural resources. Methods of conservation. First is legal protection. And in 1973, we had our Endangered Species Act, and that set up our endangered species list and that we needed to be able to take care of them. In 1975, we expanded that to flora and fauna, not just animals. Another way that we can conserve biodiversity is we set up the habitat preservation, such as natural preservations, national parks. These are areas that are set aside only for those organisms, that their ecosystem is left alone, untouched by man primarily, so that these organisms can still thrive there. We create things such as habitat corridors. So if we fragment a habitat by building something, we have ways that these organisms can then go from one side or to the other. So it allows migration of organisms from one side to another. This concept is very important, and it shows up on the test 2 or 3 times. Another way to conserve is that we have to work with people. We have to educate people. We have to have people in our preservations that are rangers, that are educated in that area's ecosystem, and it can educate our youth and our people so that when we go to the polls that we are voting with that conscience of being able to conserve our ecosystems. Sustainable use is using our resources in natural ways that will not damage the ecosystem. And coming up with other resources that we can use that we can replenish in the time that we use them. Species reintroduction and preservation, both of these are on the test, and preservation areas are areas that these organisms can live and not be bothered by anything, live without being able to be killed by humans, etc. Also, species reintroduction, they can be nursed back to health and then put back into their natural habitat. Captivity. This is only effective for some species. It is things like zoos. Zoos are captivity. Some organisms cannot thrive completely in zoos. They may not be able to reproduce in zoos because it's not in their natural habitat, and some may even perish after being in captivity. We need to also protect our plant species, and we do that by seed banks. And we collect the seeds of these endangered species, and we keep them in an area where they can be grown and they can be housed so that we can use them again. So these are all the different things that are going to be on the test. Also, please take note of your exotic species article and understand what I talked about earlier in these audio notes. Also, you need to understand what are some good savings of collecting aluminum cans for the environment. Not savings such as collecting money. Do not say something like, my dad collects aluminum cans for money. Savings for the environment. And please don't say that animals walk around and eat aluminum cans and may cut themselves. Animals do not eat aluminum. All right? So think about that as another possible essay question for you. All right, good luck.